All right, so this is the other half of the group is going to be making the sauce, and this is what you guys are going to be doing. You're going to need a liquid measuring cup for measuring your sauce. You're going to need measuring spoons for measuring all your herbs and spices and your sugar. And you're going to need a wooden spoon, or in this case plastic, so that you're stirring your sauce in the pot. Now you're going to add everything to your sauce pot, which is another piece of equipment that you're going to need, before you turn anything on the stove. Everything first gets added into here. So right in here I've got my tomato sauce. In this container right here I have tomato paste. Open it up. And tomato paste is going to be a lot thicker than the tomato sauce. The reason we add the tomato paste is so that it thickens our sauce. It's not spaghetti sauce. We don't want it to slide all over noodles. We want it to stay on top of the pizza. So we want to thicken it a little bit with the tomato paste to make sure it stays where it's supposed to stay. We're going to need oregano, we're going to need basil, garlic powder, and then we're going to need a little bit of sugar to sweeten our sauce up so it doesn't have that acidic tomato taste from the tomato sauce. All right, so the first thing for the directions says add everything into the sauce pot and then heat on medium or low. So if you have a gas stove, you're going to heat it on more of the medium setting or the lower setting, because this stove has an open flame and it's actually going to get a lot hotter faster than this electric stove over here. If you have the electric stove, you're going to want to be somewhere between like a 5 and a 6, like a medium to like a little bit of a hotter range. You don't want to heat it too hot too fast, because it will start bubbling and it will shoot all over the classroom. So that would be a bad thing. Then you'd have to clean it up and you'd have no more sauce. So let's start with adding our ingredients in. It calls for 3/4 cup of tomato sauce. So I'm going to look on my liquid measuring cup and I see here there's a 3/4 measurement. And I'm going to just pour it right into there. I'm going to, again, look at it at eye level. Going to kind of scrouch down to make sure that I don't get too much. There we go. Because if I get too much, I won't have enough herbs and spices in there. And if I get too little, it'll be way too potent. So I'm going to add the sauce into there. And I'm going to move on. So the next thing it calls for is tomato paste. We need 1 tablespoon of tomato paste, which is going to be this bigger one right here. I'm going to actually put it right into my container, and if I actually come up on the side here, I can kind of even it off a little bit. I mean, it's not going to be perfect. If you want to use a straight edge spatula, that might work a little bit better than what I just did. And I'm going to add my tablespoon right to my sauce. All right. The next thing it calls for is a 1/2 teaspoon of oregano. So then that's going to be my green one right here. And my oregano, it kind of looks like basil. They do look similar. And if it has a top on it like this, I'm going to actually peel the whole top off so I can get the measuring spoon inside. Now, I don't want to add this much. It's like a heaping amount. If I shake it a little bit, usually I can get it even, but I have a butter knife right here, so I'm going to use the butter knife so I can kind of even it off. Kind of chop it. This one's a little hard to even off, so I don't get too much, and I'm going to add it to my sauce. Then it calls for a 1/2 teaspoon of basil, so I'm going to switch back over here. I'm going to get to the basil. They do look similar. I'm going to take the top off, and I'm going to put the measuring spoon right inside the container. Again, I'm going to give it a little shake. You can even it off a little bit. Kind of chop it. Make sure to get as much herbs and spice, or these are herbs, right back into the container so that we don't waste them, so that we have enough. And then a 1/4 teaspoon of garlic powder. So that's the little yellow one right here. And the garlic powder looks a little bit different. And we're going to do the same thing, put the measuring spoon inside. This one's a little bit easier to level off. You keep the measuring spoon in there, you keep your butter knife or your straight edge spatula. Add it in. And last but not least, it calls for 2 teaspoons of sugar. The reason we add the sugar is so that we don't get that really acidic taste of the tomato. Alright, 2 teaspoons. So I'm going to put it into the sugar. I'm going to level the sugar off. We got 1 and we got 2. Alright. Now I'm going to take my wooden spoon right here, or wooden spatula, and I'm actually going to stir everything together. All right. Once it's stirred together, this is kind of what it should look like. And now we're gonna have to heat it on the stove. So what heating it's gonna do is it's gonna start breaking down those herbs, those spices, everything that we put in there. It's gonna start breaking, the heat breaks them down and it distributes them evenly into the sauce so that the sauce is very flavorful. So I'm gonna come over, I'm gonna turn my stove.
Morgan Shagley, please come to the main office.
Okay. All right, so I'm gonna turn my stove on. If you have the gas stove, you're gonna hear a tick, and then you're gonna see a flame. So you wanna make sure you hear those ticks, and then if you keep turning it, counterclockwise, you're gonna see the flame big, and then you're gonna see that it gets smaller. And I said you wanna be on like that medium setting, so that's what the flame should look like. Don't put your hands that close to the fire. And you're gonna heat it up on the stove for about 10 minutes. Make sure your pan handles are not facing outwards. They can either be facing in towards the side or the left or the right side. So either one of these are fine. And you're gonna just keep stirring it the entire time that you're heating it so that it doesn't pop everywhere. Like I said, once sauce boils, it starts making these bubbles and it'll start popping everywhere, which will make a huge mess, and then you won't have any sauce left. If you do need to walk away from the sauce for any reason, you gotta make sure you put the lid on it so in case it does start popping, it all stays in the pot and it doesn't start getting everywhere else. I'm gonna let that sit there for a second while I walk over here, and in case you have an electric stove, you can see that the pictures down here to show you what burner it would be on. So this red dot would be this big burner right here. And then I would turn it somewhere on like the 5 to 6 range over here. This is my medium side, so that it heats up. Because if you leave it on the low side over here, it will not get hot enough and it will not heat up within about 10 minutes. So I want to be somewhere in like this 5 to 7 range about here. High would be too hot, but this area is where I would want to have my stove if that was the oven I was using. Once your sauce is done being heated up, so pretend, you know, it starts, you'll see steam eventually start coming up. It might bubble a tiny bit, but nothing crazy. You're gonna actually turn the heat completely off, and then you're gonna let it set for, I don't know, about 5 more minutes so it cools down a little bit, and then we're actually gonna transfer it in to a Ziploc bag, and then the Ziploc bag will close up and we'll put in the refrigerator, and we'll make sure that we're gonna label our bags with our kitchen group so that we know whose sauce is whose. And that is the end of the sauce.